I have two giant stacks of books here. The thing to know about this stack of books is they are all Black authored and they're all historical fiction. As we go, I'll let you know if I've read the book or if it's on my TBR. River Sing Me Home by Eleanor Shearer. Holy moly. This is a novel about a mother who lost her children that were sold into slavery. It's her journey to get them back. It is epic, it is beautiful, and I think about it still to this day, 2 years later. American Daughters by Maurice Carlos Ruffin. My girl Melissa said this is good and I trust her. I know she wouldn't let me down. Pre-Civil War, French Quarter, The Unexpected Diva by Tiffany L. Warren. This is still on my TBR. It is a story I did not even know of Elizabeth Taylor Greenfield, who was born into slavery and later became one of the most highly renowned opera singers. On Women by Victor Lavalle. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce that. This is an early 20th century homesteader story about a woman with a mysterious trunk. It is billed as historical horror, speculative fiction. Homegoing by Ajasi. This book has been on my TBR for far too long. It's the story of two half-sisters born in Ghana, and their lives take very different pathways, and it's all about kind of their ancestors. So it's told over the course of decades. The Good Lord Bird by James McBride is also on my TBR. This is pre-Civil War Kentucky, about an enslaved man who somehow connects with John Brown, the famous abolitionist. It's a National Book Award winner. Why would you not read it? My Name is Ona Judge by Suzette Harrison. I'm very eager to read this. It is on my TBR. It's a dual timeline with a historical timeline well before the Civil War. It's actually the story of an enslaved woman who worked in George Washington's household. Whew! The House of Eve by Sadika Johnson. This is the story of two very, very different young women in the 1950s, Eastern Seaboard, Philly and DC settings. Both are Black. They're from two different walks of life. Their journey into womanhood, motherhood, it's so good. Junie by Aaron Crosby Eckstein. This is a book that I am currently reading right now. It is pre-Civil War, South, antebellum, slavery story about a young woman whose sister has died and she's trying to figure out what happened to her sister. So far, I am loving this because it is so lyrical and beautiful. It has a magical realism / paranormal element that I think I'm going to absolutely love. Wild, Beautiful, and Free by Sophronia Scott. My Fable Book Club is currently reading this and we're seeing some mixed reviews. I'm seeing some folks talk about that it's kind of rushed and doesn't feel as developed as they would like. This is a story about a young woman who is sired by a plantation owner, and he treats her as if she were like any of his children, but when he passes, wicked stepmom, you gotta go. So she sells her into slavery, and it's the story of what happens to her after that. Red Clay by Charles Fancher. I absolutely love that it's written from the perspective of Black men in post-Civil War Reconstruction. It highlights a lot of the issues that former slaves faced. All We Were Promised by Ashton Lattimore. Three young women in pre-Civil War Philadelphia. One is enslaved, one has run away, and one was born free. They all come together and care for each other. James by Percival Everett is as good as everyone says it is. This is not Huck's story. This is Jim's story. And this is a powerful story about a man who is educated yet enslaved, and he is doing whatever he can to protect himself, his integrity, his family. Is a mirror that we should hold up to our modern day society. Conjure Women by Afia Atakora. This sounds a little bit like it has a sprinkle of magical realism, maybe a little bit of a horror twist. It is all about an enslaved woman whose mother was the local conjure woman on the plantation. She has since, it sounds like, passed on, and there are things going on at the plantation that the young woman knows this is not normal, and she knows she's supposed to do something about it, but she's not sure what. Yellow Wife by Sadika Johnson. If I had to choose between Yellow Wife versus House of Eve, I probably would choose Yellow Wife. I feel like this one just pulled and tugged at my heartstrings a little bit more. This is the story of a light-skinned woman who is sold to a jailer who essentially houses slaves before they go to market. Her role is essentially to be his wife. Through that, she has some power and influence. Thread Collectors by Shauna Edwards and Allison Richmond. I just finished this and I really enjoyed it. It is the story of an enslaved man on the run who runs away to join the Union Army. It's also the story of a Jewish man who joins the Union Army. Both men are musicians, and both of them are so connected to the women in their lives that they all end up interconnected. Can't We Be Friends by Denny Bryce and Eliza Knight. Y'all, this book hit me so hard. I loved this book. It was a fictionalized account of the little-known friendship between Ella Fitzgerald and Marilyn Monroe, and the two authors capture these women so eloquently. Long Gone Come Home by Monica Chenault Kilgore, as well as her other book, The Jewel of the Blues. Both are really good. I actually enjoyed Long Gone Come Home a little bit more. This is the story of a woman who she just really wants to get married and have a life and get out of her family's home. She marries a man who isn't the best provider. He's not the greatest guy, but he loves her hard. In an effort to go find some way to provide for his family, he literally takes off. She hasn't seen him for a very long time, and she goes off looking for him, leaves the kids at home with family, and goes off to Chicago in search of her man. Other Princess by Denny Bryce. This is another one that's on my TBR, but it's about a kidnapped African princess who becomes the goddaughter of Queen Victoria. The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I have not yet read this one. I'm very excited about it because it sounds more like a literary fiction, maybe very lyrical and beautiful prose. It is the story of an enslaved man who, when his mother dies, it sounds like either he inherits from her or through his trauma, develops some type of almost magical power. I have 5 left. I'm gonna rank them. These are my top 5. Number 5, Let Us March On by Shara Moon. I loved this book. A maid in FDR's White House and the influence that she had on FDR in helping to shape the early civil rights movement. Shows you a different side of FDR, and always seen him painted in this super positive light as it relates to his policy. It was interesting to see it from through this lens. Jessamine Ward, Let Us Descend. Holy smokes. If you like poetry or prosaic novels, this is definitely it. This is about a young woman who is sold deeper and deeper into slavery. Follows her on this journey, both physically, walking to New Orleans as part of a group of slaves sold south, as well as emotionally just diving deeper and deeper into what it means to be a slave and what it means to be free. Harlem Rhapsody, fostering and growing literary talent that went on to shape the Harlem Renaissance. The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. This book is so good, and I cannot say enough good things about it. It is billed as historical horror, and it is horrific, but not in a scary way. I have a surprise. Not just one number one, 2 number ones by the same author. Dylan Perkins Valdez has my whole heart in her hand. Take My Hand is set in 1970s South. It's about a young Black nurse. She's fresh out of nursing school, takes a job at a local clinic, and gets assigned to these 2 sisters who live in extreme poverty. This is a social justice, civil rights, reproductive rights story that had to be told. It is my favorite Black authored historical fiction until I read Happy Land by Dylan Perkins Valdez. It is an intergenerational story all about intergenerational wealth and how Black people have just been robbed of a group of formerly enslaved South Carolinians who walk up a hill essentially into North Carolina and start over. They create this utopian society and call it the kingdom. They're trying to recreate what they remembered or what their family members told them that Africa was like. They identify a king and a queen, and it is the story of the queen and her descendants.